Whoa, can you find me? Ha! I'm Hidden Legends. Wow, okay, that was bad. But here we are on EX Hidden Legends, and it's time for a wardrobe update, as they actually did change that reverse holo pattern in this set. Thankfully. Before, I actually wasn't mentioning it, but now it's actually different. The reverse holo pattern showcases all the different types of symbols as they sprawl across the card, which look really nice, in my opinion. I just like how it's switching it up when it comes to the reverse holos. This set has 102 cards, 101 in the main set, and one secret rare. It was also released on June 14th, 2004. This set goes back to the traditional illustrated artworks that we're used to, which I'm actually thankful for. This set is filled with so many different things, but there aren't too many trainers, which definitely isn't a bad thing. Also, I wanted to thank you all for getting me to 10 subscribers. I know that some people always brag about hitting like 100,000 subscribers or a million, but I'm just happy that anyone has an interest in the videos that I pour my heart and soul into. And if you like them too, maybe you should consider subscribing. Anyways, let's just cut to the chase and get to the trainers. First, we'll talk about Mitsuhiro Rita's trainers, being the ancient technical ice, rock, and steel, which I believe to be linked to the Reggie Pokemon, and the cards show these elements floating in a little bubble, and I think that's all I can say about that. Next, we'll talk about Ken Ikuchi's trainers, being the Ancient Tomb, which is a stadium in the middle of a rainstorm, and the Island Cave, which is a stadium with flowing waters all around it and rock faces. Next, Shinichi Yoshikawa worked on two trainers as well, being the Magnetic Storm, which shows an aurora and lightning clashing together with a deep night sky, which is actually pretty remarkable for a trainer card, and the Desert Ruins, which is a stadium in the middle of a sandstorm, has rocks surround it. Next, we have Ken Sugimori's trainer, being the Steven's Advice, which shows a default render of Steven standing in front of a very realistic window, which is alright. Finally, for trainers, Ryo Ueda worked on a life herb, which shows the herb with white energy all around it, looking pretty green and good. Wow, this area is kind of burning out of lava. I think I might need to escape this area here. Hold on, give me a second. Ah, well now I have to climb up the tunnel above me, to the surface. Our first artist for cards is Nakaoka, who I accidentally called Nakaoa in the last video, but aside from that, they worked on two cards for Hidden Legends, being the Chinchou, which sits with its mouth wide open near some coral, and the Togepi, which raises its arms in a flower field. These cards are very cute, and I like the soft 3D art style. Next, we have Shinichi Yoshikawa's cards, being the Chikorita, which looks to the left as it prances through the sunset, and the Totodile, which walks along the beach with its mouth open. I actually like these 3D renditions of the starters, and they don't feel too egregiously 3D, but they have charm. Now, we have Ayakusube, who worked on the Staryu, which lays on the ground and water surrounds it, the Chinchou, which looks down at the bubbles all around it, the Starmie, which takes up much more of the card, with its little jewel glowing, and the Lantern, which illuminates the deep dark seas, and all these cards are very nice Kusube cards, as we've come to expect from them. Naoya Kimura has been featured in almost all these sets, and for good reason. Their Jigglypuff showcases the Pokemon sitting on some leaves with the moon behind it, as deep rich colors are used, and the Igglybuff looks up as it stands on some sort of grassy patch. Finally, the Corsola travel in a pack, but one looks up with its mouth open, looking towards the surface, which looks stunning in my opinion. Ken Sugimori returns from EX Magma and Aqua to give us some more basic render cards, but some are actually interesting, such as the Metang, which reflects light sun and deep fog in the back, casting a shadow on the Pokemon, and the Beldum oozes off psychic energy. These cards utilize the Sugimori style in a semi-effective way to make it seem like they were doing something before. For Hidden Legends, Sumiyoshi Kizuki was commissioned to illustrate the different cast forms, and I think that they did a great job. I like the regular cast form, how he sits around in some kind of laboratory, fitted with a thermometer and a clock, with books all around. The sunny cast form looks to the right as sun blares all around it. The snowy form looks down at the holes made in the vast snowy landscape, and the rainy cast form takes cover under a tree as rain droplets fall all around it. These cards all feature very thick outlines and have something interesting about them all to look at. Mitsuhiro Ito was only commissioned to illustrate two regular cards for the set, being the Beldum, which flies upwards as the moon sits directly behind it, and the Metang flies around during the daytime as a tree sits nicely behind it. These two cards may not be many, but the atmosphere of them is superb, and something that Arita never fails to capture. Next, we have Toshino Aoki, working on four whole cards for Hidden Legends, and we'll start with the Vulpix, which looks around, with a thick smoke all around it. The Surskit, which prance along the top of the waters, with a house in the back. The Ninetales non-holo rare, which looks to the left, with that same thick mist in the back, but a mountain can be perfectly seen lining up with the Ninetales. And finally, the Masquerade non-holo rare, which flies up, with the water that the Surskit were prancing on behind, below them. These cards by Aoki are simplistic beauty, which is how I feel about a lot of their cards. And now, we'll talk about Kagemaru Himeno, who illustrated the Plusle and Minun, which connect into one card with the rainbow in the background linking them up. The clam pearl sits underwater chilling. The spinda walks around as a volcano sits around it, and lens flares can be seen on the whole card, which looks really nice. The relicanth, which swims along peacefully. The huntail, which has its mouth wide open as it swims viciously through the deeper waters, and the gorbis swims along, looking to the right, with some nice underwater foliage, and dead coral in the back, from what it looks like. Himeno is a talented artist through and through, and it is always nice to see their name in a set. And next, we have Miki Tanaka, working on the Dodo Duo, which look at each other as they prance along, the Love Disc, which float around the water, the Dodrio, which look all in different directions as they wade through the grass, and the Chimecho, which floats downwards away from a steamy mountain. Our next artist is Yukamori, who worked on a handful of cards. Firstly, we have the Oddish, which sits in some dirt with an open mouth, the Gulpin, which looks up, the Swalot, which hides behind some clovers, the Gloom, which sits down smiling, and the Blossom, which dances as it stands on some grass. Always nice to see Mori's name, because it just breaks up the regular art that we're used to seeing, and it's still unique from regular 3D cards because it's clay. Oh wow, climbing up these rocks really worked me up a sweat. Now, where the heck am I? It looks like I'm in some kind of enclosed cave, hidden away from society. I mean, I did climb up here from all the way down below. Ah, I'm tired of hearing that noise. Why don't you just show yourself? Whatever. If it wants to fight, then I'll get it at some point. Anyways, now we'll talk about Hisao Nakamura, who did a tentacle, which slaps the camera, the sea dot, which peacefully walks along, the tentacruel, which raises the water around it, looking straight on at it, the nuzleaf, which poses in a cool-looking way atop a tree, and then the shift tree hollow, which looks to be posing, and at the same time I'm sure that it looked very cool and normal at the time, but come on, shift tree really is just dabbing in this card. Anyways, good cards by an even gooder artist. Next is Koki Saito, working on the Beldum, which looks at the camera as it flies through a library. The Metang, which punches at the camera with the sea and the islands in the back. The Tropius, which bends its neck to the right as it's surrounded by trees. And the Metagross Hollow, which takes up the whole card, looking very menacing. Now, we have Atsuko Nishida, working on the Spheal, which prances around some water. The Rhyhorn, which walks along a deep dark forest. The Metatite, which poses up looking at the camera. The Celio, which looks to be in a similar area to the Spheal. The Rhydon, which dances up the same forest as the Rhyhorn, the Walrein Hollow, which splashes around the water everywhere, the Milotic Hollow. As its body flows along, it looks upset, and it looks really cool. And then the Metacham Hollow, which locks its legs in different positions as it looks down. All of these cards are very nice, especially the hollows. Next, we have Ryo Ueda's hollow card, being the Jirachi, which actually looks very nice. I like how it flies along with the disgruntled look on its face. Another 3D artist who got a holo is Kenny Kuji, working on the Cyndaquil, which lights the forest around it up with the back flame, but Ikuji also worked on the Dark Celebi, and it's actually pretty cool to see a dark Pokemon again. I feel like we haven't seen one in a while. But this one shoots leaves everywhere, which I think is pretty cool. Next, we'll talk about Tomokazu Kamiya, who worked on 4 cards for Hidden Legends, starting with the Whismer, which piles sands together and it looks very concerned, and then the Feebas, which looks up as rain comes down all around it. The Loudred literally slaps at the camera with rock faces in the background, and the Exploud Hollow opens its mouth wide open as it stances up, which actually does look pretty cool for an Exploud card. One of our final artists for the set is Hajime Kusajima, working on the Machop, which strikes looking at the camera, in the desert, and the Machoke, which flexes its muscles as it looks to the left, and the dunes can be seen behind it. The Pinsir Hollow, which looks very menacing, with deep dark shading as it raises one of its little claws and looks at the camera. The Machamp readies one of its fists and looks towards the camera, which does look quite nice. And then, finally, the Heracross Hollow, which is honestly one of my favorite cards in the entire set. I just love what Kusujima has done with the dark shading, and the extensions of its wings gives off a really nice touch. It makes a Pokemon like Heracross look almost menacing, but definitely intriguing. Next is Kyoko Umamoto, one of my personal favorites. It's nice to see them do one of the most suspicious looking Voltorb cards in all of existence, which I really love. The Baltoy is neat too, with the tree in the back and the nice wavy clouds. The Electrode Hollow is quite nice as well, as it looks to the right with a smile on its face, and the Claydol extends an arm out of its nice background that sits behind it. Umamoto just has a nice simplistic style, mixed with wavy lines and wonderful simple and effective colors. Now we have Midori Harada, who illustrates so many cards, but still keeps their wonderful style, starting with the Zubat, and wow, I really love the deep dark red sun/moon in the back, with the Zubat flying along, with the rocky stalagmites/tights in the back. So the snow run is nice as well, as it stands near some ice, and you can see its reflection in the back. The Shuppet dances along the water and looks up, which looks very fantastic. The Golbat tries to cover one of its arms over its face as it sits in a cave. The Glalie sits down next to some ice, looking at the camera. The Crobat Hollow looks down at the camera, which is also really stunning. But I think, if not one of my favorite cards from the entire set, is probably the Banette Hollow. I just really adore how serene they made the Pokemon look, as it looks at its own hand and sits on top of a rock. It also helps that I'm a huge fan of Banette, but still, it's a nice card. Now, we move on to the EX cards, and we'll start out with Hikaru Koike's EX cards, being the Groudon, which stands menacingly, with extremely dark shading, and the Kyogre, which has very dark shading as well, as it looks over and to the left. Then, we have Arita's EX cards, being the Metagross, which stances up looking at the camera, the Regice EX, which features the cracked ice holofoil, breaching out and extending its arms, the Regirock EX, which pushes its hands forward as its other hand lays to the side. And this one also features the cracked ice holofoil. All three of the Regis do. And then the Regiseal EX, which pushes its hands together looking like it's trying to make some kind of energy attack. These EX cards by Arita are all awesome, and it's also our introduction to the Regis into the TCG. Our final EX cards were all done by Ryo Ueda, being the Ninetales, which prances along, and what looks to be eyes in the background are shown, and it takes one step forwards. Then the Vileplume EX, which looks up and to the right, with a nice green background. And finally, the Wigglytuff EX, which opens its mouth and looks over to the side. All the EX cards in the set are all amazing, as always, but especially some of these are quite awesome. Finally, we have the secret rare for the set, being the Groudon, illustrated by Mitsuhiro Rita, who has been doing all these secret rares so far, but this one is absolutely stunning. It's one that you don't really see being talked about, but the illustration is actually gorgeous, with the water splashing all around the Pokemon and its mouth wide open. It's no wonder why it's a secret rare. When it comes to my favorite cards in the set, I really love the Groudon secret rare, Groudon EX, Metagross EX, and the Wigglytuff EX. I love the Banette, Crobat, Heracross, Milotic, and Pinsir Hollows, and I like the Ninetales, Beldum, Corsola, Spinda, Chinchou 56 and 57, Feebas, Voltorb, and the Zubat. The set was really something else. The artworks are shining in this set, and the EX cards are vast and varied. It even features many of the Gen 3 legendary Pokemon, which I find awesome, especially considering the fact that you don't really see the set being talked about that much. But our next set might be even more exciting for most people, as we'll be talking about EX Fire Red and Leaf Green, which is an awesome set in its own right, and I'm excited to review it. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to keep posted when I review the new set.